Kimbra, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. As I just mentioned to you there, since following your newsletter and obviously being aware of your musical career as well, I'm really intrigued to see where this conversation goes today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So as you are aware, we jump straight into it, and I start with the question of, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Yeah. There are so many questions that I'm wrestling with at various times of my life, and it's almost as though each year has its own question, or three. And I tend to think of each year as being marked by sometimes like a key word or a key theme that I feel like the spirit is encouraging me to reflect on, or the general tone of the year might have a feeling associated with it, a challenge associated with it. If I had to summarize it in one question I'm exploring this year, it would be how to find balance. And what I mean by balance is, well, it's closely tied to rest. It's not something that I'm naturally predisposed toward. Anyone who's been following my career or even my writing knows that there's kind of a extreme, prolific nature to what I do. Although I guess I did take like 4 years between albums when I did like my first and second album. But in the last 2 years, 3 years, I put out 2 albums, a podcast, started a Substack, 2 tours all around the world. It's like I just don't stop. And, there's plenty of, I'm sure, psychological analysis one can do about that, and identity being tied up in work and value and, being a performer and all of that. But, sometimes it takes a long time to learn something, and I'm okay with that. It's September now, and I don't know if I've learned how to rest better. I think I have. I think that I'm aware of it, and that's the first step, isn't it? Like being aware of the thing you want to work on. But yeah, when I say balance, for me, balance will come when I learn how to rest, I think. So that's something that I'm focusing on this year.
For you, just that even relationship with balance, I know you're saying this is a question for you this year. Has this been something that's accompanied you for quite some time, or how would you kind of describe your relationship with that?
Yeah, I think, you know how things have to get really extreme sometimes, or you have to hit a rock bottom before you go, all right, that's it, I'm changing, or that's it, I'm making this the core priority of my life now, is to establish balance or whatever it is. And so, yeah, unfortunately, that did look like burnout. In saying that, burnout led to me starting the Substack, because I'm not sure if you'll remember, the very first 2 essays that I posted were about a very important show that I performed in 2023 at the Sydney Opera House. I've told the story a lot, but I'll tell it again because it is truly the great crossroads of my life. I can put it up there with like one of the top moments where my whole trajectory changed. I was so tired, exhausted, disillusioned after my tour of A Reckoning. It was world tour. It was a very emotional album. The album traversed emotions like rage and catharsis, and explored my relationship to my anxiety and to my sexuality. And it was a very visceral album. And it was really emotional to sing the songs live. A lot of them were very, very heavy lyrically. And I got really bored, actually. And what I mean by bored is that, like, every night would play out relatively the same. And although I appreciated my audiences so much, and there were, the tickets were selling well and it was a successful tour, I just didn't want to be set apart anymore. I didn't want to be heralded and worshipped. And, I was doing meet and greets, 60, sometimes 60 meet and greets before the show. You know what I mean? Like, even before I stepped on stage, I'd exerted all this energy, not talking at length with my fans about, interesting things, which they're all interesting people. So I know we would have interesting conversations, but just taking photographs. And it leaves me so empty. And I remember someone asking me, because the end of the tour had come around and we were finishing it off with these shows in Australia. And Sydney Opera House was one of them. And then there were a couple of other venues that were surrounding that show. Someone said, "Are you excited to play the Sydney Opera House?" And my face went, "Yeah." But my heart didn't. It didn't feel excited. And it was that moment that I knew. I was like, okay, something's very wrong. Like I've been doing this. I mean, that's a milestone for a career. And when I really am wrestling with something, I go into prayer. That sort of just looks like silent meditation for me, but it has like a posture of receptivity, and I'm directing a question or directing a war cry, please help. Please tell me what will make me want to get on that stage. Because right now, I don't. And, I'll go so far to say that I did receive some sort of answer. This is always tricky to explain, isn't it? Because it's not an audible voice, but often right? Like the spirit does speak, I believe, and it comes to us in different ways. I mean, it's not dissimilar to a download when you're creating something, but let's just say that a download came, and it's very simple. The word was silence. And I thought, well, what do you mean? I'm a musician. What do you mean silence? I sat and reflected on it more. And then it occurred to me that the very thing that I was craving most was rest and silence. And I felt that the Spirit was asking me to take the thing that I needed most for myself and give it to my audience. So do both. Give it to myself on stage and give it to them. So what that meant was I was being called to perform a show, hour and a half long, and to ask the audience to withdraw their applause for the entire evening until the end of the show. So after every song, I had this vision that people would stop and go quiet, for an extended period of time, 5 to 6 breaths. And I imagined it in my head, and I thought, now I'm excited. Now I want to get out there. Now I care about what happens. Now it could all fall apart. And that's the danger I need. And so I called my band and I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm your boss and you got to listen to me. But I said, we've got 2 weeks. I want us to alter the intros and outros so that instead of like it ending abruptly, I want them to go into drones, like long sine waves, just like, ooh, and then fall away. And I want utter pin drop silence. I said, I'll put an announcement over the front of house, announcing to people that tonight will be an experiment in presence. I did this over pitch black. And it was a poetic kind of, I did a Substack post about this and you can kind of hear what I said. It's an audio file of it. So this is the first song begins and, it's the first chance to do the silence. And you think, how is this going to go? I mean, what's going to happen? Are they going to heckle? Are they going to complain? Are they going to forget? Anything could happen. And they did it. And there's a couple of, like a little bit of awkward, chatter or whatever. It went pretty well. Second song rolls around. They did it. Pin drop silence. All you can hear is the hum of the room. And for a moment, I'm not performer on stage. I'm just one of them. I'm listening to the song as well. We're all hearing it together. We're hearing the song and then we're hearing the silence after the song. And what we're doing, which is another theme of A Reckoning, is we're breaking our loops together. We're breaking our patterns together as herd animals. We're doing something different together. And, Mark, I didn't do this for praise. I didn't do this to receive a huge, amazing, glowing review. I didn't care. In fact, because this is the thing about crisis. you get to a point with depression, which I now do not call depression. I've decided to reframe it for myself, and I use the word honeybones, which is a season that I experience where I don't really want to get out of bed, and it's very chronic and debilitating. And the thing about honeybones is when it gets really bad, you begin to find this courage, and you start to make drastic choices, like doing things like, I'm going to go on the Sydney Opera House stage and do a show in silence. Now, the reason why you have the courage to do that is it can't get worse. Do you know what I mean? Like, it can't get
Yeah.
worse. I already feel terrible. I'm already not enjoying being on stage. Well, for want of a better word, fuck it. Like, I'll just try this, and and there's something powerful about that. There's something really powerful about being like, I've got nothing to lose. I'm rock bottom anyway. And from that place, something transcendent happened. Not only was it my favorite show I've ever played in my entire career, but it was also a really, really powerful show for other people. And I heard many people say it was one of the most powerful shows they've ever been to. The reason I bring that up is it's like rest is at the core of what that show is all about. And what I realized as a performer is that part of my calling is to actually take the things that I'm learning in partnership with spirit, in partnership with other people, and use that in my work as an artist. And this is how the Substack started. Was I was so moved by that experience at the Sydney Opera House that I said, I want to write an essay about this. And I wrote an essay, and I'm really proud of it. It's all about what I was exploring around celebrity worship, which is something that I feel is a very, very dark part of our culture. And I launched the Substack based off this kind of exploration of what it means to be an artist in the music industry, a sensitive artist that needs to stay sane. So yeah, that was a long ramble, but
No, because I always say to people, whether it's on the podcast or the private interviews I've done around this question, there's no rambles here. I think there's always some of the most interesting things. But as someone, as I do, I run these experiments over the last few years called silent conversations, where
really,
we may not introduce ourselves. We may sit in silence with people we've never met for 15 minutes to start with. I'm utterly fascinated by what the experience was like, even as you say, for a few breaths in between songs, when you're at the front of a stage, and as you say, there's this I almost felt like as this collective, like, okay, you can hear the murmuring of the crowd, but people are more falling into almost the silence as it goes on. How would you even describe that sense? Given, it's almost the antithesis, right, of what you'd imagine someone might hope for after a song finishes, i.e. applause. So I was just really curious as to what that was like.
well, to give someone your silence is to be extremely generous. It's so generous to be completely quiet, and it's so loving, paying attention. It's the greatest form of love, right? To just sit and listen to someone. And it's not even about like, hey, listen to me. Like, I want you to gaze upon me and be silent. It's let's gaze upon this moment and let's be so present in this moment. And of course, there was no phones allowed either. And let's be so present to one another. And yes, I'm a leader in that space. I'm leading people into that space, which is a gift of mine, right? But it's not me. We're doing it together. There's no song without the room. There's no song without every brick that's been laid by hands of laborers. There's no performance without the audience. We're interdependent, you see?
Yeah.
So it's funny, like, I've had many applauses in my life, Mark, but that was the most powerful reception to a song that I've ever experienced. Truly, like, and I know that, you know, you might think, oh, her ego like would want an applause. And okay, to be fair, there was an amazing applause at the end of the show, which was crazy. But I didn't. I don't actually like applause. And I don't mean that from like, I don't enjoy it at shows either. Like, you know, when the song finishes and you get that beautiful 5 seconds and then everyone goes, like, first of all, I don't like the sound of applause. I find it very jarring and aggressive, you know, like it's very intense. I find it erratic and just, you know, I mean, I really like when people do that after a show, you know, like a snapping of the fingers. So yeah, it's aesthetically, it's not a sound I like anyway, but also I always feel very separate when people applaud me. It's kind of, and I'm not saying I don't like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, there's a time and a place for it. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't do this experiment everywhere. And there's totally, I love like a good punk rock club and everyone, you know, it's like, that's also really fun. But if I had to choose, this is my preference as a way to engage with people. And just to be clear, I wasn't playing stripped down material. I wasn't playing songs to a grand piano, softly singing. No, I was playing songs of mine that are quite aggressive, like songs like Replay, which is like a club song, and it's very like I scream in it. And, you know, but like I said, there was a choice. I didn't end the song abruptly, because if you end the song abruptly, it's very hard not to clap because we're so conditioned. But if you end the song with a long drone and you let it extend out, people kind of get eased into it and they can be brought into rest.
What is it for you, just in that acknowledgement of, you know, there's love in that silence? For me, in lots of those experiments, you mentioned that other word, interdependence there. There's something about that I think invites us into an acknowledgement of that, or an acknowledgement of that connection. And even, I don't know, there's something very non-hierarchical about a silence, like a shared silence. I'm just curious from your perspective, when did you even have that hint of that? I know you were saying there was a download before the show, but from your perspective, just that connection between silence and love.
Well, this is my practice. I mean, I've had a silent practice since I was, I don't know, 18 years old. I began meditation. I am not perfect. I have spells where I fall out of it for days, even weeks, which can be really frustrating because I believe it's the most powerful. My prayer practice is like the anchor of my entire life. So when I fall out of it, I'm really often very disappointed in myself. But I've meditated with a mantra for a long time, a silent internal mantra I learned from the Christian mystics. Meditation has been a staple in Christian tradition for a very long time, but it's not known. People only associate meditation in Eastern traditions, which is a real pity. But it's very similar to transcendental, or, you know, it's just using a mantra. But that 20 minutes of silence each day is sacred. And it's, like I said, it's just my art practice is not separate from my personal life. That's what I keep realizing now. I'm like, oh, I see. I'm trying to practice rest in my own life, like as a person, Kimbra the person. Oh, that's what I need to bring to my professional life. Oh, I'm trying to integrate myself into deeper prayer, and that prayer consists of silence. Oh, I'm supposed to do that in my professional work as well. Oh, I'm trying to break thought patterns. I have a chronic anxiety and I'm trying to work on breaking loops. Oh, I'm meant to do that as well. So I do that musically, right? I'm really into looping. I'm really into polyrhythms. I'm really into cutting up the bar and doing interesting, you know, things with drums, right? So it's super interesting, right?
For you, just from that perspective of, because I've heard so many moments where people reflect on that, where it doesn't come a download or a message from a sense of spirit, doesn't come necessarily with a voice per se, but there's clearly something felt. how would, even in that moment, and I know it's hard to maybe go back and put yourself there essentially, and to feel it the same way it was felt in the moment, but for you, how do you how did that come across? Like, I know this is a bit vague, but like,
Yeah,
what was the felt experience of that?
yeah. Oh, so tricky to explain, isn't it? It's sort
Mm.
of that
Yeah.
effervescent, ephemeral thing that we can't put into words, and the best word we have for it is God, and it's a pretty terrible word because it's got so many connotations. But um, all right, let's go back. Well, I know it was right before bed, so it's possible I was already in that state where you're quite receptive, like a little bit sleepy. Um, these moments tend to happen when I really am at my worst. So when I really have sort of feel close to giving up. And that makes sense, right? Because you're surrendered. Now your ego can't get in the way and try to analyze everything. You're just like, I've got nothing left, you know? And I think that's a precursor for spiritual experience in every single tradition, including 12-step traditions. Um, it wasn't really, I wonder, I don't think it was a word, I think it was a vision. I think I imagined myself going out there. I saw myself going out there and being at rest with my crowd. And I imagine I embodied the feeling of there being something a bit dangerous about the night, you know, which I need. I need that. It turns me on. Like when it's just like, here we go. 1, 2, 3, go. I get so bored, you know, and that's why you'll find on the internet, like every single one of my performances is different, you know, because I just can't stick at something for, I get too, and I don't want to cheat my audience, you know, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm telling them to enjoy it. Well, that's lying, you know. Um, so I imagined myself, and I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because we create, we are partners with God. Our thoughts dictate action. And so it makes sense that I guess I thought about this, you know, or I saw myself going out there and doing it. And then luckily I had the courage, I guess, knowing that God was with me to say, to go, I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to do that. You know, and that's the part where the bravery is needed. Yeah.
And I don't want to labor this moment too much, but I think it's staggeringly beautiful. Just the concept, the inception of it, the vision of it, where you were at a moment in time, how enlivening that felt. But there's something so gorgeous you said there, just around the idea of being close to a place of surrender, or even when you described HoneyBones and how great courage can come from that,
Yes.
because it's almost like, well, it can't get any worse than this.
Yes.
These moments are what I'm always so intrigued by, though. The When you feel like you're acting then on behalf of, or something is coming through you, could you describe, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be in this moment, it can just be maybe generally how you might reflect on this. Even though there's danger and even though there's uncertainty, how would you describe then actually the moment then of actually delivering on something like this, like moving through with it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say that I was brave and I had courage, but there's something about being empowered by spirit, getting a
Mm.
message, getting something given to you. It's grace, actually. You feel like you're the recipient of something very, very powerful and beautiful. You feel very lucky and you're very humble. You know, I mean, maybe, well, I'm sure there's a version of this where you actually take the insight and let your ego go wild with it. Because that's another thing I could have done, right? Is like, I'm going to do a silence show and I'm so amazing and I'm so original and I'm going to do it just because I want the applause at the end, you know? But I'd like to think that that's not where my head went. I, it was more a gesture of surrender, the whole thing. And so when you feel that God is with you or something is higher is with you, it's not that hard. It's weird. It's weird. It's not that it's not. it's not that it's not like scary. It is scary, but it wasn't like, oh, how am I going to do this? It's like, no, I just know I've got to do this. I just know. And it's funny because my life has been marked by moments like this. And I wish I could say, oh, every week, but it's more like, I don't know, I can count it on two hands probably, which is not that much considering I'm 35. But it's unfortunate in a way that I do receive. So it's not unfortunate, but it's frustrating that I do receive these very, very strong gut instincts on things. Well, they're more than gut instincts; they're like callings, right? Because then I demand them from spirit all the time. I want to feel that all the time. I'm moving out of my apartment and I want to know where I'm going next, and I want to know, tell me what to do next. And when I don't receive that insight, I grow very scared and I grow very disappointed and I grow very, again, this is the ego wants control and certainty, and that's not how spirit works. If you're lucky to get the grace of an insight now and then, you are very, very, very lucky, you know? And again, often that'll come through great hardship. So even though I'm lucky to receive that, I have suffered deeply in this life, and I it's interesting to say that, isn't it, as someone that's also been so blessed. But it's a double-edged sword, with great sensitivity and ability to write about your emotions in a very direct way comes a huge bandwidth for feeling things, and that means you feel everything. So those insights are, they didn't come easy. I didn't make them happen. Spirit did that, but I had to be worn down enough to be humble, I think. So it's not easy. It's not like, I just ask God and God talks.
But I think there's something really beautiful. Grace is a beautiful word to describe it. Like, I think even like in times where people can move through moments where they still feel fear, but it's almost like an attunement or being with the fear, and there comes with it so much more. Like, it's not this debilitating sense that almost just plays to the sense of aliveness with it. But there's I don't know, there's just as you were even describing earlier, the sensation of writing something so personal and seeing that, like, your work and your life are obviously just intertwined, and you get to sing about things that can be deeply personal or emotional to you. Even then, the experience of then having to, whatever about writing them, but repeatedly performing the same thing
Yeah.
about something so personal. I can imagine, without having any experience of being the performer in that sense, I could just imagine that becomes difficult to perform something so personal, or something that has weight. It's not just a fun idea or something. As you said, it came from the point of view of being potentially worn down, or being moved to the point of insight, which, for a lot of people can seem to come from that process of, getting to a point of almost surrender that something comes.
Yes. Yes.
For you, just really intrigued, when did you get comfortable with the sentiments of, I know you're saying you've been meditating for a long time, but the sentiments around the idea of, like, something is speaking through me, or, like, was this something that you've experienced before a practice? Was a practice something that helped you, I don't know, come to terms with it more, or to be able to navigate it more, or how would you even describe that?
Well, there's a reason why I'm so interested in mysticism, mainly from the Christian and Buddhist traditions, although the Sufis remain very interesting to me as well. Um, I I don't feel weird calling it this. I believe I had a mystical experience at the age of 14. And, you know, one can read about mystical experiences, whether it's, St. Teresa of Avila or, St. John of the Cross or Rumi. I mean, mystics define these experiences through words like ecstasy, euphoria, transcendence, you know, tongues of fire. I mean, all kinds of anything that you can imagine that is some sort of like religious ecstasy. I wasn't raised with anything religious, so I had no context for what happened to me, except that I was a seeker. I was writing songs that were basically all prayers, trying to understand, what was going on. And I think I'd had some exposure to churches through friends, but nothing in my own family. But once I had that experience, and I won't talk in depth about it, but I would just say it was an expression of unconditional love, something that was beyond anything I'd experienced from an earthly standpoint. And it had a slight kind of Christ quality to it, which is why I was interested in looking into that tradition. Also, it was both motherly and fatherly. It was personal and sort of impersonal. It was a paradox, and that's why the mystics make sense to me, because they're not afraid of paradox. There's all kinds of contradictions. God is masculine and feminine. They talk about God with like almost sexual language, which would be blasphemy in traditions, but it makes complete sense to me because, in my experience, it was sensual. It was almost like orgasmic, it's like there's no other way to talk about it than using that language. And that was 14 years old, and then I left my country at 17 to start work on my first album, and I believe it was a calling that sent me out at that age too. I just knew. I knew that this was my service. I knew I wanted to help, and I knew that I was being called somewhat. And I became quite serious about, faith at a young age. And that's changed a lot over the years. I mean, I think that now it's something that I practice in a more well, I don't believe it has to happen in a church. I host a meditation group at my house, and I do have a reverence for a lot of scriptures and texts. I think that there's a lot to be learned within like the various traditions and the various scriptures. But I'd say that my understanding of God or whatever is far more expansive than it used to be when I was sort of a young person, which makes total sense because when we're young, we just want the containers, we want the black and white, so we understand things, and then we grow up and we're like, okay, whatever God I was into at that age is a very, very small one, and it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't ever grow out of that extremely small, bigoted God. I continued to have experiences like that throughout my life. Like I said, not a lot. And I say it with full humility, not to be like, I'm so special. It's like anyone can have these, but I think that some people are, and again, it's come with a cost. It's not all, my receptivity and sensitivity to the spirit realm has its downsides too, especially living in New York City.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can,
Yeah.
I can imagine that. What I find really interesting though is I wonder, like, is that cost? Do you think because I have some friends that have, really just very different experiences of life than I'd say a lot of people would do, like in terms of what they might see, what they sense, their perspective of reality, and they're full of integrity. Like, and while our experiences don't overlay, if you know what I mean, totally or something, there's things that have occurred in my life where I'm very sympathetic or open to what many experiences of this life could be. From your experience, is that cost of that sensitivity? Is that a reflection on the rigidity of the cultures or the energies of the places you find yourself in? what do you kind of sense is that just part of this life? Like, are these does freedom come at a cost in ways, if you know what I mean? Like, is that like, how do you kind of sense that?
Hmm. Well, I really like what the Christ said, the cross, right? We're all given a cross to carry.
Mm,
Everyone. Everyone has a cross in their life. And I love the symbol of the cross because it goes upward, connecting heaven and earth, and it's horizontal, connecting us to one another. So the symbol is very, very powerful. Um, yeah, we all get given our challenges in life, and I think the reason why the empath or the sort of spiritual seer or the person that has a unique sensitivity to spirit, um, and unique in the sense that like everyone is unique, is that you feel all the angels and you feel the demons too, So when I walk down the street and I see someone injecting themselves, right, or their legs are scabbed from their usage of crack over the years or something or whatever, it's like I can't handle it. It's like I have my practices now to work with it as an energy, but I just it's like I don't have skin,
mm,
sometimes. So I have to work to kind of, and I mark myself. I do a few kind of like physical embodiment things where I put a force field around myself, which allows for me to let in love, let in the beautiful qualities of that person, but to repel out whatever is not of love. Because, a lot of these people also are highly sensitive beings that drugs have given them a way to touch God. Also, I believe a lot of like heroin addicts and that they were deeply sensitive people that um, were seekers. Longed for transcendence in the same way that I do. Um, and when they touched that portal with drugs, which I know how that feels. I mean, most of us have had some sort of experience with psychoactive substances, and it is amazing, right? But once that door was open, it was too hard to close it, right? And so, we're not really any different. I just had music. I found it. I was able to, and I wasn't genetically predisposed towards addiction in the same ways. But I still have addiction. Everyone has addiction. That's the other thing. It's like, we're all. I don't know. It's so funny. I have a teacher who says to me, "Our gifts are unique, but our wounds are the same." I love that,
mm.
And so often we lead with our wounds, we tell each other what our worst parts are or what our, addictions are or whatever. But the most important and interesting thing about us is our gifts, because that's what's unique. Nobody can do what Kimbra does. Nobody can do what Mark does. But if you tell me about depression, it's like I actually that's actually the same as what I go through. It's a different intensity, but do you know what I mean? Like it's actually
Yeah,
least interesting part about us because it's the same at the core. We all, the addict. I have an addiction too, to my thoughts. I have an addiction to constantly ruminating on very dark stories. So it's like everyone has a thing.
isn't that the? I tell you, some of the times I think that we, maybe even just in a wider sense, we don't, without that acknowledgement, like that everyone has a thing, almost, that we don't allow ourselves to see the shared nature of these things because so
Yeah,
much of it remains hidden. And then maybe in a connected sense too, we don't get to see what most people's gifts are either, because they sadly remain hidden for a lot of people
yeah,
too, just in terms of,
exactly.
the sense of being seen. And you said that term earlier, even just in a kind of a mystical sense of like the, even if it's a taste, a brief momentary taste of an unconditional love, I think even an experience of that just greatly changes. It's not like that's the perpetual state that we reside in, but just an awareness of its existence, I think, is is profoundly impactful in just in how we meet the world or how we be in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
From your point of view, that sense of love, or even the sense of, pursuing a career from the age of 17 with some degree of even conviction, like moving countries. How would you describe that sense of almost like I don't want to describe it too much for you, but like it sounds almost like a knowing, or just like such a conviction that you knew what you wanted, or something to that effect. How would you even describe that?
Well, it came from identifying that whatever I did in this world, I wanted to make a difference. So I knew that. And my dad's a doctor, my mum's a nurse. Like I came into this world through service industry. I mean, and I care about people a lot, Um, so I would play these concerts when I was, like 12. And then at 14, I was performing quite a lot, with my guitar, original songs. And I would see how much it meant to people. They'd come up to me and they'd be like, I loved that. That was amazing, And I'm just a kid, but like it really touched people. And on top of that, I loved it. So it was this marriage of like, oh, I guess the thing that's making me really happy is also actually making other people really happy. And so I think it was really as simple as that, where it was just like, oh, this is a thing. And then, gosh, talk about being lucky. Like, it was just one opportunity after another, It's just like suddenly my music's on MySpace. Suddenly Jamiroquai's manager wants to sign me. Suddenly I'm in Australia and I'm getting my living expenses paid for, and suddenly I'm in the studio with Gotye. Suddenly I'm being signed to Warner Brothers. So you know what I mean? And then you go, okay, I get it, God. You want me to do this. Like, I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, I get it. So I just followed and leaned into that. Yeah.
What is the sense of some of those things occurring or falling into place? Like, given the sensitivity you allude to, given the 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 importance of silence, like how, just out of curiosity, like how is that to follow all of that, and have these parts of you too that crave silence or stillness or connection with spirit. How has that been for you, like to navigate that?
I mean, I think it's been really important to stay connected to my country, and go home every year because for Christmas, I wish I could go more, but uh, it's nature that grounds me. It's always been the trees, specifically the trees and the leaves of the trees. Um, that's how I stay connected to myself, my true self. Sorry. So I'm really grateful that I know that, if I ever get too carried away, I'll just go be quiet with the trees in a forest and I'll find myself again. And that's what it's like to grow up in New Zealand, you can't divorce the person from the landscape. And the music is, I first received my first melodies and songs sitting on the helm of my father's boat, looking out at a volcano, on a lake. And I'd sing to myself. I'd just sing and sing and sing. And then I'd get back to the lake house and I'd write it all down and I'd record the song into a little dictaphone. That's how I started. It's almost like nature gave me songs, or the spirit, because I was just kind of communing with and when you understand more about our indigenous culture, the Maori people, that this is just 101, it's like the ancestors are in the mountains. They have personhoods, they have rights, like actual rights in New Zealand, the rivers and stuff. We acknowledge that they are not just they're living entities. The ancestors are imbued in the natural landscape.
And when you think of that initial question, like that's even accompanying you this year, of like how to find balance and rest being a sense of that, and even just this the experience in the Sydney Opera House of how this even is was forming within you as well. How does that? What does that sense of balance? What does that suggest, or what does it kind of look like, or how is it forming at this point in life? Then,
Yeah. It's funny because I have a tattoo on my arm, which is literally just the musical symbol for rest. You know, when you're reading music, it's like rest before the next note. So it's that important to me that I have to have it right there on my left arm just to remind me. And even then, I find myself, catch myself, and I haven't taken an actual breath for just, I'm running from one thing to another. I'm, loving the New York energy. I'm, writing 5 songs in a day and just, absolutely cannot stop, and of course that's then followed sometimes by terrible crashes downward where it's like the opposite, right? But in those seasons where I'm really, really running a million miles a minute, I think I've got these experiences now that I can call back. I can remember the Sydney Opera House and be like, remember that? Remember how powerful that was? I can look at my arm. I am more practiced now in breath work. Like I've done a little bit more, I've done more work around, the power of the breath. I practice like Ayurveda, which is this kind of way of eating that is in balance with your body. And, you drink a lot of like special teas that are meant to help balance the nervous system. And, again, I'm not perfect at this stuff. I'm not, but it's there. There's some tools now, I actually try to prioritize sleep. I'm not great at it. I've been a functioning insomniac for most of my life, adult life, and it's really a burden, but the awareness is key. And then just like that whole thing of like tomorrow, just be 1% better, 1% better. Like I love that phrase, because it's so manageable. So I just try to think about that when I think of rest.
you said you had a beautiful expression earlier, going back to the Sydney Opera House, just around how you could either, like, I think it was rest or relax with the crowd in the silence.
Yeah.
Um, just intrigued as to what that state of not in that particular moment, but just what rest and what that sense does to, whether it's an interdependence, whether it's a sense of love, or whatever kind of comes up in that sense.
It's trust. It's
Yeah.
trust that it's not you all in control. You're not in control. Like that's the thing. That's what lets God
Yeah.
work or spirit work, is when you say, all right, I take my hands off. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it together. And then spirit's like, all right, finally, now we can have some fun. But you've got to get out of the way, you know what I mean? And stop thinking that it's all on you. It's not all on you. Don't have to do it all on yourself. You don't have to do it all on your own. I don't have to stand up on stage and do it all on my own. I can use my audience and say, hey, I need this too. They love me. They come because they love to see you and they love your worldview. Another thing that I realized, and I don't know, I feel like spirit gave me this as well, but my mission statement as an artist centers largely around both rest and liberation. So when I liberate myself on stage, I in turn give people permission to start practicing liberation for themselves. When I rest on stage and bring rest into the space, which can be done in silence, but it can also be done with sound. When I sing a ballad that like brings people into a state of rest in their nervous system vibrationally. When I rest on stage, I allow for other people to rest. So rest and liberation are very, very powerful words for me. And I think if someone follows my discography, or at least comes to my live shows, I would say those 2 words are very like strong in the work, or at least in where I am now as an artist. Yeah.
There's that's a beautiful sentiment, though, even just around the sense of what it does to one's nervous system. I think with all the things that we look to focus on, I think that's a really beautiful thing to be aware of, like what is this doing to my nervous system, or what is this person, or what is this environment, or how are we affecting each other's nervous systems? Just curious, and it's kind of just even the second last question that I'll have, but just from your perspective, that what is liberation for you, both in terms of just life, but also even in that state, in that presence of being on stage? Like, what are the things that come to your mind around that?
Well, yeah, in life, it's being not controlled by your emotions to the point where you're a prison of your thoughts. Like if you're just a prisoner of your thoughts, that's why the Buddhists call it suffering, right? Samsara. You go round and round and round, and this is the kind of imprint, or the scientists will say the neural pathways. It's very destructive. You can become almost a completely different person, right? If you do it for 7 years, you've overturned all your cells and now you're literally thinking that way, and it's very, very hard to break. It's why the most success they're getting now is from psychedelics, which can literally, ibogaine and stuff that can like change the brains of a trauma survivor, PTSD. Um, and the same thing's true on stage. Liberation is the same. It's the same thing. Not being controlled by my dark stories. I want to be on stage and I want to be surrendered. I want to be a channel. I want to be free so that I can use my gift and something flows through me and we do it together. And that's what elevates the frequency of people in a room. That's why it's very important work what artists do. It's not just a bit of fun, you know?
But there's something beautiful, I think, as well, even to that notion of when something is coming through you, it can't ever be the same twice, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
like you get into the repetition of something, but when that is coming through you, it's never it's never the same feeling twice,
It's boring.
irrespective of what it might. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Kimber, just looking back on even this initial sense of how do I come more into balance? This beautiful idea that you usually have a question or a word to define each year, and balance and even rest being a part of it. This gorgeous example at the Sydney Opera House, and taking this chance, but also not having a choice, or just surrendering to the point that you knew something different had to happen, realizing the significance of silence, but more so as well, it sounds like even just that realization of a real a real kind of example of it, just how your work, and both in terms of, or your life and your work are intertwined, and how there's such an expression of that through your work. The significance of even depression in life or suffering, and the significance of sensitivity in terms of creativity, and also just the living in New York, the importance of nature in life, also the idea of something feeling like it's dangerous to you, that there's some novelty, the significance of mystical experiences, mystical exploration, a curiosity around this kind of sense of faith and mysticism, even in Christian roots as well, and really just this, I don't know, this beautiful sense of not even the paradoxes that you've addressed here, but some of the kind of the paradoxes that your life almost seems to present or embody as well. Really curious to ask you, Kimbra, the question of what is a good life for you?
Hmm. Hmm. I'm going to use the quote the Christ again, but one that holds and embraces the fullness of life. That's the best answer I can think of. Like he talks about the fullness of life, and I've always thought that's really beautiful, and it's not one that we focus much on, because I think we think of religious dogma as kind of being the opposite, right? It's like exiling so much of life. No sex, no this, no that, right? But Jesus is saying, I want you to have the fullness of life, you know? Like the kingdom of heaven is here. It's already here. It's not out there. And so in my lesser moments, I want to annihilate parts of life. I want to stop suffering. I want to, and everyone does, right? But like, I don't want to feel certain things, and I don't, and when I push them away and resist them, they just get worse. So a good life to me is one that says, all right, buckle up. all of it's going to happen. Something makes me think of one of my favorite quotes by an author called Frederick Buechner. He says, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Do not be afraid."
Something kind of perfect about you saying that to me today. I've reflected before as well, this sentiment of, I get a real sense of divinity sometimes when I can be with both immense suffering and immense joy, either at the same time or in close proximity. And, as you were alluding to, even that gorgeous sentiment of kind of HoneyBones and the creativity that opens you up to, because within that is almost an inherent sense of surrender. I think that speaks to it so much as well. Kimbra, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. I think there'll be so much that I'll be taking from this conversation. So really appreciate it.
I had a great time as well. Thank you so much.